Hi, my name is William Stewart,
I'm Xavier Runnels.
I'm Terry Williams.
and today we are interviewing Mrs. Robertson about her military service and
The rest of her life.
the rest of her life.
Okay, so I guess we can start asking you about your childhood. So where were you born?
Arkansas.
So you grew up in Arkansas?
Yes.
Okay. What city in there?
Osceola.
What was it like there? Like what do you remember about your childhood there?
What was that?
What do you remember about your childhood? What was it like?
I enjoyed it.
How many siblings did you have?
I had one brother.
Okay.
So what was it? Around what year were you born?
1924.
24. So what was it like growing up as an African American in like the 20s and 30s there?
What was it like? Was it segregated?
Where? In
Arkansas.
In Arkansas.
When you were growing up.
yeah, in Arkansas it was.
I see.
And how did you feel about that? Being segregated, couldn't sit next to whites and eat next to whites and things like that. How did you feel?
I don't know. I guess I got used to it after being with it for a while. You get used to it.
Did you think it was fair that they segregated the blacks from the whites?
I don't think it was to separate them, because a person is a person, legs and feet. And
So, also adding to that, you're a woman. So, how did that affect how you grew up and just how that was for you?
Being a woman
hmm
in the South, were you treated differently because you were a woman?
I don't think so.
Did you have the same opportunities as men when you were growing up in the South? Could you participate in sports and?
Yeah.
All right. So, what do you remember about the Great Depression that was going on when you were growing up? Like, how did it affect your family? What do you remember happening around then?
Your family was poor, right?
hmm
And what did they do to make a living? What was their jobs?
The farming was
Yeah, tell the young
farming.
men. Yeah.
All right.
They didn't make a lot of money farming, did they?
No.
So, do you remember like anything in specific how being poor during that time affected you or your family?
When you were poor, you didn't have a lot of money, right?
no money.
So how did you survive? When you with very little money, your family.
I don't know. I guess we just did.
So, how did you come to join the Army? Like, how did you get to the point where you joined?
Yeah, why did you join the Army?
I don't know. I guess just to get away.
And then your mother died,
Yeah.
and you and your brother couldn't afford to take care of yourself, right?
Right.
So you went in. You went in the Women's Army Corps, and he went into the what?
Navy.
And it was so you can what? Support yourselves?
Yes.
So, when you joined, what was the training like? Like, what kind of training did you go through when you joined the Army?
Your basic training, what was it like?
You say what I like.
What did you have to do in basic training? You did your basic training in Fort Des Moines, Iowa, right?
hmm So what did we do?
Yes. When you were in Iowa, what did you do at training?
Marching and the different things that the Army have you doing.
Okay. Did you have to wear an Army uniform?
Yeah, I think I did wear a uniform.
Okay. Did you take classes?
Yeah, we had classes.
Okay.
Would you say it was probably similar to what men in the Army would also do? You say it's probably the same as,
What,
The training, was it the same as what the men's training, or you don't know?
I don't know, I guess it was something on the same order with women instead of men. But the men and them did the same training, I guess.
were the like officers and people training you, were they women or men?
What, I don't understand.
Who was training you? Were they men or women? Who did the training in Fort Des Moines? Were they women or men?
Women,
Were they white or black women?
I think they were black, or they were black and white, I don't know.
So do you think that had an effect on how like you interacted with them as opposed to if they were white? Do you think that would have changed if they were white?
Because you were in all segregated units, so everything was black in your unit, and then the whites had their own. So do you think you got the same training as the white women whacked?
I think so.
So did you get the? Do you think you got? Did you get the same pay as like a white woman or a white man, or as opposed to like? Do you think you got paid differently?
I don't think so.
You think the pay was the same?
I think it was the same.
Do you know if it was the same?
The pay,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it was the same. The Army is the same. The first sergeant or lieutenant, it was whatever you are.
So you get paid according to your rank,
Yeah,
and your rank in the Army was private?
yes,
So you went to England after your training, correct?
You went to Birmingham, England?
yes.
Do you remember anything about the trip on the boat to England?
I don't know.
When you went
remember.
over on the Ile de
Yeah,
France?
Ile de France, but I don't remember anything.
Was it a lot of women on the boat?
Yeah, there was women on the boat.
Did it take you a long time to get there
Mm,
by
not-
boat? Because you left from New York, right?
Yeah.
Camp Shake, New York?
I don't think it taken us a long time, no.
Okay.
Okay. So you got to England and you got to work there. Do you remember how were you treated by the people in England? Like, because there aren't a lot of African American people in England, so how were you treated differently there?
I couldn't have too much different. We got used to each other. And
Do you think they treated you better than they did back in the South? Do you think you were treated better there in England?
The people in England, they were nice to you, right?
oh yeah, they were nice.
And then they invited you into their homes, correct?
Yeah,
And you socialized with them, right?
yeah,
And you couldn't do that when you lived in the South because everything was segregated, right?
right,
So you were treated better
right,
when you were over in England than you were treated when you were at home in the United States.
yeah.
How did that make you feel?
It didn't bother me too much, I don't think, about the difference from being in Arkansas. It was okay,
You were just glad people were treating you nicely over there because you
Yeah.
were so far from home?
yeah,
So after that, you went to France, correct?
yes.
Do you remember anything about when you being transferred to France? Like, remember going there?
Do you remember, how did you get from England to France?
Must have went on a ship.
A train or
A ship,
to go to France?
yeah.
Okay. And how were you received once you got over to France? Did they treat you nicely over there in France?
They did, yeah.
Yes, I was gonna say. Were you treated? How did that compare to like the South, and how did that compare to England? How were you received there?
I was treated in England.
In France?
In
Were you treated better than you were treated in England?
I don't think so.
The people were just as nice?
Yes and I.
You gotta look at the camera. Okay.
So, did you go anywhere after France during the war?
after France.
You received orders to return where? Back to what country?
There's a Breckenridge, Kentucky.
To the United States?
Yeah,
So, yeah, when did you go back to the United States?
Was that December of 1945?
yes.
So, do you remember anything in specific about your time in France or England? Was there anything that stuck out to you, anything notable that happened there?
Did I know anything that happened?
What did you like about being in France and England when you were over there and you worked for the Army? What did you do while you were over there?
I don't know, maybe.
Would you sort mail?
Yeah, mail, because I was in the mail. But worked in the post office.
And did you do anything else? How about the bakers and cooks? Were you involved in that?
No, I probably has been in it though, with the cooking, cause
And since it was segregated, and how did you get your hair done when you were over in France and England? Who did your hair?
I don't know, we did our own, I guess.
The other women in your unit?
You know, usually, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, what happened when you came back to America? What did you do?
What did I do when I came back?
Yeah, what did you do? Tell the students what you did when you came back. When you left Fort Des Moines, Iowa in December of 1945, that's when you separated from the military, you went to live in Detroit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You went to live with who, your aunt?
Yeah, Zeta.
And how did you get to Milwaukee? Why did you come to Milwaukee of all places?
How did I come to Milwaukee?
Was there a 688?
Yeah,
What was her name? Do you remember? Evelyn what?
Ross.
Evelyn Ross? And she invited you to attend her what? Her
Oh,
sister's?
wedding.
And you came here and you stayed, right?
Yeah.
So, when you originally got back to America from the war, do you remember being treated any differently because you served in the military? Was there any like special, like coming back, like parade or anything along those lines?
Did that what?
Did you have a parade when you
Yeah,
came back?
we had parades. Though.
But that was over in France. Did you have one in this country, in the United States, when you came back?
We probably did.
No, there was no parade, remember?
No parade.
No, no recognition and no parade.
Oh,
So you'd say that you weren't really treated any different by anyone just because you were in the military? Would you say that you were treated the same as everyone else?
It was segregated when you came back in 1945. So did this country treat you better because you served in the military, even though it was segregated, or was segregation was just segregation, was separate?
I don't remember.
Okay.
So why did you decide to stay in Milwaukee after you got back?
Did I have a job? Was I working or
Yes.
something?
Tell the students. You're not talking to me. Tell the students. Tell them. Use your voice.
I worked.
Right, and that's why you stayed, right?
Right. I had a job.
What was your job here?
Was it at the post office?
No, and here in this country, when you came back from the military, you worked for VA hospital?
Yeah, I worked at the hospital, at VA hospital.
So you were a nurse, correct?
Aide wasn't a nurse. I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah, nurse's aide.
So, what about Evelyn Ross? Why did she invite you here again?
Now, why did you come to Milwaukee? Evelyn Ross's sister's what?
Wedding.
I see. And then you just stayed here ever since then?
Yeah.
And Evelyn Ross is, was a member of her battalion,
I see.
the 6
Triple A.
So, you worked at the VA. Is that mostly what you did since the war? Have you worked any other jobs, gone any other places?
You were primarily a nurse's aide, right?
Right,
At the VA,
yeah,
and you worked at St. Camelia's
yeah,
as a nurse's aide.
yeah.
So when you came back from the war, you didn't get any recognition for that. But I read that you were finally recognized somewhat recently for that. You were given like the medals and stuff that come with serving in World War II. So how did that feel when you finally got recognition for your service?
I don't know, 'cause,
How'd you feel? Were you sad or were you happy?
yeah, I guess I was happy. I wasn't sad.
Uh-huh. Did you think it was it was time that you get recognized for your military?
Yeah,
So when did you get married and have your daughters? When was that?
Well, Janice is 54, so was it 52?
yeah.
So, what did you think about when the civil rights movements were going on in the 50s and 60s? What did you like participate in anything? Did you really think about that at all?
I remember you used to take us to the open housing marches.
Oh, yeah.
And why did you take us on those? You thought it was important for what? To have open housing?
Open housing,
And we used to march across the 16th Street Viaduct.
yeah,
You remember Father Grappi?
yeah,
Did you march with him?
yeah.
So, what was it like raising your children? Because it was still during a segregation period in the 50s and the early 60s. So, what was that like raising children then?
What was it like to have 8 children to raise when everything was so segregated? What kind of values did you teach your children?
I don't know. I just, that each person was a person, and I didn't think you should be treated any different, because of who you was.
Were you concerned about your children being having to grow up in that kind of an environment? Where they may be denied opportunities based on the color of their skin?
Oh, so there's a lot of segregation, yeah, with people of race.
All right. So, the Cold War was going on after World War II. So, what did you think about like the Red Scare, communism, Soviet Union? What was your opinion on all of that, all of those things?
Was it different in it?
Well, the communists, were you fearful of the communists or no?
Well, somewhat.
Why?
Not. I don't know, because I just figured that the communists could do harm, so it just had that little fear of them, but didn't have too much problem with anyone.
So, relating to that, do you remember Senator Joseph McCarthy at all, and what he did?
What?
Joseph McCarthy, do you remember Senator Joseph McCarthy at all?
No, probably don't.
Oh, no, she doesn't.
Okay. So, what was it like living during a time of the Cold War where there was all like the threat of nuclear attack? Because that was like a constant fear of America that we'd be attacked by the Soviets with nuclear weapons. What was that like?
Were you afraid?
No, I guess not.
No?
I can't remember what was I be afraid of.
Of being attacked by a bomb?
Oh, yeah. Well, the war is bad, right. Anytime in that war area.
So, do you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis? Remember that event?
Did I do what?
Do you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis?
No.
No.
Do you remember President Kennedy?
Yeah, President Kennedy.
what do you remember? Do you remember anything special
He
about
was the
him?
president.
What was
You-
so special about him? Was he a good person, do you think?
I thought he was.
Why was he a good person? What did he do?
It seemed like he would help people that needed help.
Did he want to end segregation or
Very
voting
probably.
rights?
Yeah.
So, what did you think about the Korea War when that was going on? Do you remember having any opinions or thoughts about the Korean War?
No.
What about Vietnam? That was a pretty polarizing war. Do you remember what you thought about that and all the protests that were going on about that?
Vietnam War, when they sent all the soldiers
Oh,
over to
yeah, I
Vietnam?
remember the war, right, that war.
What did you think about that?
I didn't like it because I think my brother must have been in the age group when he was caught in the army, the Korean army.
Okay.
All right. Another thing about the Cold War. What do you remember about the Berlin Wall in that situation in East Germany?
What?
The Berlin Wall, where they separated East
Wow.
and West Germany. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No.
So, do you remember having just any opinions about like the overall situation of Europe with Soviet control, the whole Iron Curtain, anything about that?
What do you think about the Russians?
The Russians? Oh, I don't think they were war,
What'd you say?
when we had the war
Can't hear you. Oh, okay.
with the Russians.
Were you fearful of the Russians and what they could do with their bombs? Or
Oh, yeah.
So, what about the communist Chinese? Did you have any fears about them, what they could do?
Communists.
Chinese? In China, were you fearful of China and
I
what
don't-
they could do?
No, guess
No.
I wasn't.
So, we kind of want to go back to your World War II experiences. So, because that's what we're trying to get more information about. So, are there any like particular events that really happened that you recall that happened during your service? Like anything special really happened? Did there?
Separation.
Oh, I think over the years, my mother is 95 and her memory is not really good. But I can speak about her service and the stories that she shared with us when she was in the military. And she enlisted, as she indicated earlier, for self-sufficiency reasons. And it was segregated, as you well know. And my mother has often spoke about members of the 688 as being like family, that they looked out for each other, that because it was segregated and they had to rely on each other to do each other's hair, let's say, and that's very important for African American women in their hair. They spend a lot of time doing their hair. So the women in the 688 really took an interest in looking out for each other. And so I think that even though the conditions were very harsh when they arrived in England, they were forced to work out of a warehouse. There was no heat in the warehouse. They had rodents running around the warehouse because that's where they stored the 700 pieces of mail that was backlogged. And the windows were blackened because of the Germans were attacking. So it was not ideal conditions for those women. However, those women courageously served their country, even though in this country they were not even recognized as a citizen of the country, and they were treated so poorly and harshly just based on the color of their skin. But they went over there and they represented African Americans well by doing an outstanding job. They cleared the backlog. They had an order to clear the backlog in 6 months, and they cleared that backlog in 3 months in Birmingham, and then that's when they received orders to go and clear the backlog of mail in Rouen, France, and they likewise did it in 3 months.
Yeah,
And they had 6 months to do it.
how did they manage to do that? Like, what did they do anything special to get through it so quickly?
Yes, it was quite challenging, my mother would tell us, and based on what I've read as well, trying to get the backlog organized, sorted, and to direct it to who it should be sent to, because some folks would send mail just with the name Johnny, or let's say John Smith, and there could have been 20 John Smiths. So they had to go back and find out who this particular John Smith could be, so that person could receive mail or packages. And it was very important for the military servicemen and the other civilians working in the European theater operations to receive those mails and packages, because they kept the morale up. And the members of my mother's battalion, the 688, had a motto: no mail, low morale. And so that they were able to locate the service people, and by coming up with a system to find out which John Smith, they say, is it. And then they worked in shifts, 3 8-hour shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to make sure that mail was directed, sorted and directed, and the service personnel received it.
All right. Did she ever like see or hear combat, or like see like captured German soldiers or anything involving that?
No, but when they arrived on the Ile de France in February of 1945, they just missed being bombed by a German U-boat. So they were definitely in a situation where they were placed in harm's way. And as I indicated earlier, they were housed in a warehouse, and the windows were blackened so they would not be seen and identified, because they could have blew up the warehouse if they knew that there were American soldiers in there.
So how did you feel about like the Germans during the war? Like, how did you feel about Nazi Germany? Did she like have any thoughts on them?
My mother doesn't speak ill of any people. She was there to do her job, and she didn't hold any harsh feelings against the Germans. And she went there, and she represented her country she was given an order to sort the mail, and she, just like she was discriminated against in this country as a black person, but she didn't hold any ill feelings against whites because they didn't give blacks. She just would journey through life being a good person. She's a Christian person. She has always relied on her faith and the teachings of the Bible to lead her in the right direction. So I think that all this dislike for another group is something that she doesn't carry in her heart.
All right. So what did she do with her spare time when she was working, like when she wasn't working in the warehouse?
When she was in the military?
Yeah, like when she wasn't actually doing her work, what would she do? Just like.
Well, as she indicated, sometimes they met families over in Birmingham, England, and they were invited into their homes, right, Mom?
Yeah.
And they were invited into homes in France. And the women would go out and tour. You traveled a little bit while you were over there, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They would go, and then they had dances, and so they made the best of it, even though it was segregated, but they found ways to enjoy life and the experience.
So, being African American, did you feel that you had anything like to prove? Did you have like anything to prove to white people? Do you feel like?
When you were over there in the military, you felt like you had to work really hard to clear up that backlog, right?
Yeah.
Because they didn't want African American women in the Women's Army Corps, isn't that correct?
Right.
So you guys worked really hard to do a good job, so that they could see, the commanders or the higher up people in the War Department at the time could see that African American women can do a great job, right? Mom?
Yeah,
So other than the U-boat attack, or that you during the trip over, did you ever have any other times where you feared you might be in danger from Germans?
When you were in the military over in the,
I wasn't afraid of the Germans.
did you feel like, okay,
But you know, it was wartime, you know, and you, I guess, could very easily get shot accidentally or some other place.
But you were never really that close to the front lines, were you?
No,
So did you feel more afraid when you were overseas, or did you feel more afraid when you were back at home, when it was all segregated and there was all the violence going on between blacks and whites and the KKK and all of that stuff? Did you feel more safe in Europe or America?
I think at home,
did you feel safer here in this country
yeah,
with the burning, the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan? Remember they were burning houses and hanging black people from tree limbs? Did that make you fearful?
yeah,
Did you experience that when you were over in Birmingham, England? Did you see any blacks being hung? No.
no,
So more about like civil rights and that. Do you remember Martin Luther King Jr.?
yes.
What do you remember about him? Do you remember your opinions on him or what you thought about him?
I thought he tried to help people, and he was a good person.
Was he for equality?
Yeah,
You remember his speech, I Have a Dream speech?
yeah, yeah.
So how did you feel when you heard that he died, or that when he was assassinated? What did that make you feel?
When you found out that somebody had shot and killed him in Memphis.
Oh, I felt real bad about it, but I guess those kind of things could happen when you're in a war.
But he was a civil rights activist, and you felt because he was a civil rights activist, somebody was going to kill him to shut him up
Yeah,
because they wanted everything to stay the same. They
Yeah.
wanted segregation.
right.
So do you remember other civil rights leaders like Malcolm X? Do you remember anyone else?
You remember Malcolm X?
Malcolm X,
Mhm.
yeah,
You
He was
remember?
a great speaker, wasn't he?
yeah,
Great orator. And he too wanted to end the injustice in this country that people were experiencing, correct?
yeah.
Do we have any leaders like that today? Like Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks? You remember Rosa Parks?
Rosa Parks, yeah. No, I don't know if we have any.
So Malcolm X or Martin Luther King was a lot more peaceful, while Malcolm X advocated for more violent means of change. Did you feel more strongly either way, pulled towards Martin Luther King or Malcolm X? Did you feel like one was more morally right than the other? Would you say?
No,
They both were to end injustice, right?
So do you think that serving in the military and having this like all-black battalion or brigade, whatever it was, and then you proved that you did well and you could do your work well, do you think that made an impact on civil rights and the civil rights movement?
By going to the military, do you think that you made a difference on the perceptions of black Americans and their ability to serve in the military?
I guess so, yeah.
So this might have been after you left the military, but how did you feel when Truman ended segregation in the Army? How did that feel?
Segregation in the army.
Right, when he said that you could no longer have a black
Black-
battalion and a white battalion, they have to be integrated, you have to have both blacks and whites. How did that make you feel?
I think they should have both black and white. And
So you felt good about it?
yeah,
You thought it was a long time coming?
yeah.
Do you have any other experiences that I haven't asked you about that you'd like to share, or anything that you remember her telling,
About our military experience?
or anything in general that you might think is pertinent to this?
It's just that It's unfortunate, she likes to say, that people are interested in finding out about our military now. Her service more than, was about 75, 76 years later. And the few remaining members of her battalion, there are only a few of them who are still alive to share their story. And with age come, certain health type of issues. But she often would talk about why did they wait so long, so they could share their story and their voice would be heard. And I think that what my mother's enlistment in the Women's Army Corps shows is that she, along with the other women, are very courageous, were very courageous when they enlisted to serve their country. Particularly since the country did not even recognize and give them their basic civil rights. So I think that as she journeyed through this life and continues to, I referenced her spirit and her energy as one of loving people. That's why she doesn't treat or did not view the Germans and the Chinese with any negative feelings that she had. And she was like that when she raised us, to be good people, to treat people well. And I think that's the spirit that she has and she continues to show. She's a very quiet person. She's always been. When she was raising her 8 children, she was a person who didn't say much, but it was her actions, her daily actions and how she interacted with people and treated people. And I think that if more of us today treated one another with such respect and love, we will this will be a different world.
All right. So, would you say that serving in the war affected your faith at all? You said you're a Christian. Did that affect you at all?
Being in the military, didn't that help you get through when you would pray at night for guidance and protection?
Did they help with?
Yeah, did
Yeah.
that help you?
Yeah,
Did they have a chaplain when you were in the military?
yeah, they had a chaplain.
And you felt good about that?
Yeah,
And who was your battalion when you were in the military? Who was in charge of?
Major Adams.
Okay. And what type of person was Major Adams? Was she a good person?
She was a good person.
Could you
yeah.
go in and talk to her?
Yeah, you could talk to her. She's a good person.
She had an open door policy. She welcomed the women in her battalion to come in.
Yeah,
Did she look out for you because of the segregation?
yeah, she did what she could.
All right. Going to more modern stuff. You said you talked about JFK and you said you kind of liked him. How did you feel about him when he was assassinated in 1963?
When they killed Kennedy, how did you feel about that when you heard that President Kennedy had died?
I thought that they killed a nice person was always trying to help someone.
Were you sad that day?
Yeah,
Did you think that the country wasn't going to move forward because of his death?
I would hope not. I think maybe someone else might replace him. But I figure it could be just about as well as he was. We tried to anyway.
So after Kennedy died, Lyndon Johnson took over as president, and he kind of had the Great Society program where he tried to get equality for Americans and try to solve poverty. So how did you feel about that? How did you feel that he was trying to make people more equal?
Yeah, President Lyndon B. Johnson. Did you like him as president?
Oh, Johnson?
Yes.
I liked him all right, but not as well as I did President
Kennedy?
Kennedy. I liked the Kennedys better, but I liked the others. I didn't have too much trouble with any of them.
So Robert Kennedy, JFK's brother, he ran for president, and he kind of wanted to push for civil rights too, but he was assassinated as well. How did you feel about him, and how did you feel about his assassination?
Yeah. U.S. Senator Robert Kennedy,
Oh, because it's
President's
Kennedy's
brother. How did you feel about his assassination?
I feel that he shouldn't have been assassinated, and believe in people going around assassinating and killing and murdering people.
So,
Seems like the presidents tried to help us.
After Johnson, there was Nixon, and how did you feel about him? He kind of accelerated the Vietnam War, and there was all sorts of like scandals with him with Watergate and that. How did you feel about Nixon?
Yeah, do you have any thoughts on Richard Nixon when he was president? Did you think he was a good president or no?
I thought he was a good
You
president.
thought Nixon was a good president, the one who got us in a war with Vietnam? Or you don't remember Nixon?
I remember Nixon somewhat, but
They called him Tricky Dicky Nixon, remember?
yeah.
So, do you remember having any other like presidents after him that you like particularly liked or disliked, or?
How about the last president, the first African American president, Barack Obama? What do you think about President Obama? Did you think he did some good things?
I think he did.
Did you vote for President Obama?
Yeah,
Okay, and why? Well, did you think he could make a difference?
I hope so.
You hope.
Yeah.
Did he make a difference, do you think, in this country while he was president for 8 years?
I think so.
And just how did that make you feel? Because you've seen like you went through the civil rights movement, you went through segregation in the 30s and 40s and 50s and all of that. How did that make you feel finally seeing an African American be president of the United States?
How did you feel when President Obama was first elected to the White House to be the president of the United States? How did that make you feel as a black woman who was discriminated against and who lived in segregation, during the segregated times? And here we had a black man, the president. Did you feel good about that?
Yeah.
And why did you feel? Why did that make you feel good that you had a black man in there? Why?
God, a black man should have the same equal rights as a white person. Their race wouldn't make that much difference. It's who the person was.
Did you think he could do a good job as president when he was first elected?
Who President
Obama. The
Obama.
black man.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't think the black race could have did a better job than a white person. Whether a good person is a good person, or he's black or white.
Okay, so you said race shouldn't matter. If you could do the job, you should be able to,
Have it, right.
and that people shouldn't look at the color of your skin and deny you a job because of your color of your skin.
Right.
I guess we just want to ask a little bit more about MLK. So we talked a little bit about him, but like how did his like coming about and how did his teaching like affect you? Do you remember like what effect did he have on you?
MLK, Dr. Martin Luther King. How did he impact your life?
I think Dr. Martin Luther King was a good person. He tried to help people.
So that made you feel like you wanted to go out and march with him and
Yeah.
demonstrate
Yeah.
because you wanted to change the conditions that black people had to endure?
Yeah.
So what do you remember about like the 60s and counterculture and like hippies? What did you think about all that and all their drug use and all of that crazy stuff? What do you think about that? And how did that affect how you raised your children? Because you were raising your children then. Did you try to keep them away from that scene of people?
Yeah. I would try to keep them away from there because I think the color of your skin didn't make who we was.
We're talking about the
Purpose.
hippies. He was talking about people who remember when they wore long hair and they were free flowing, free thinking people. They were good people, were they not?
Yeah.
Some of them may have abused drugs, but it wasn't all of them did
Not
not.
all of them,
They
right.
were very good people, and they were people who wanted to end segregation as well, for the most part, right?
Right.
They wanted people to live together and everyone to get along, right? For the most part.
For the most part, yeah.
Okay, so were there any hardships like that you had to face, especially because you were a mother, especially with 8 children? Did that face any or give you any particular challenges that you had to face?
Yeah, you had a lot of challenges, didn't you? Raising 8 children and making low wages,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But you survived, right?
Yes, survived. Still
And what other
going.
challenges did you have besides low wages? How about housing?
Housing,
And how about education, educating your kids? Was that
the
difficult?
schools, right.
What schools did you send your children to? Were they public schools or parochial schools?
They went to both. Some that went to St. Rose, and they had some that went to the public schools.
So when did you get married?
She indicated earlier it was 1952.
Okay. So would you say that your husband made more money than you? Would that be? You say that's probably true?
No, did John make more money? Your husband make more money?
No, he's a rail work for the Milwaukee Railroad.
He worked for the Milwaukee Railroad. And he was a World War II vet as well, right?
Right,
And
right.
he was stationed in Germany during World War II, correct?
Yeah,
But you both worked together to support your family of 8 children, isn't that correct?
right.
And back then, regardless if you were a male or female, if you were black, you didn't get paid a lot of money, isn't that correct?
Right.
Okay, so when you sent your kids to school, were the schools still segregated at that point?
Yeah, the schools were segregated. St. Rose, they had very few African-American families who went to St. Rose, isn't that correct? When you
Right.
sent your children?
Right.
There were like about 3 African-American families. There were the Hugheses, right? The Jacksons
Yeah, and Robertsons.
and the Robertsons. There may have been 1 or 2 other families, but there were very few African-American families. It was,
So you said you have 8 kids, correct?
you have 8 children, right?
Yeah,
When was the last one born?
64?
yeah, just my boy.
Yeah, you had 8 children in 10 years.
Hmm.
The oldest was born in 1954, correct?
Yeah,
So would you say that raising a child who was born in 1954 versus one in 64, what was the difference between those 2 experiences?
age.
Just age, huh? Were you tired of raising children by the time that last one was getting to be a teenager?
Yeah, I guess I was.
So how do you feel about like racism in America today? Do you think do you think it's still as present as it was back in the 50s, 60s, and 40s? Or do you think it's become better or less of a thing? And how do you see that still?
Yeah, with President Donald Trump and all the statements that he makes about not allowing Hispanics to come to the country and denying people opportunities. How do you feel? Do you think we're going backwards as a nation?
I would think so. I don't think anyone should, have something against another person because of the race or what they were.
And that's the way it was in the 40s, right?
Yeah,
It was like that in the Army when you were there.
yeah,
It was like that in the South when you were being raised, right?
right,
It was like that during slavery, wasn't it?
yeah,
When they had us in bondage, right?
yeah.
I think that's about it. All right. So.